again. Woohoo! So yesterday, if you were here, we were decoding the new CBA. And hopefully, you guys enjoyed that video and I explained it properly as best as I can. So today we are going to do part 2 and talk about the other part of the, salary cap, tax apron, that kind of stuff that I wanted to talk about yesterday, but obviously I threw a lot of information at you. So I was like, let me just, stop it here and make sure that I can explain it properly as well, because I also did a lot of explaining. So we are going to get a little bit deeper into the new CBA. Before I start, like I said last time, I am explaining this as best as I can. I am reading it to you, and just based on what I read and how my brain works, how I understand, is how I'm going to explain it. I'm not looking up articles to figure out, exactly what this means. I am just trying to explain it as a person. I don't own the rights to any of this. This is the CBA. It's published online. Anybody can read it. Not a lawyer, not a cap expert. Just making that clear. So if something I say is not 100% correct, that is why. This is just me giving my explanation on how I understand it. Okay? Okay. So now that we got that out of the way, just got to make sure I say that. Let's continue decoding the CBA. Yay! Okay. So I'm starting from where we left off yesterday, because I said there was a part 2 to what I did yesterday. And so that's where we're starting. So it says, for each salary cap year, beginning with the 2023-2024 salary cap year. And by the way, when I talk about this, when I get to the numbers part, it'll make more sense. Because when I was reading this, right before, I got on here, when you read the numbers part, it makes more sense. You'll see. So in the event that there is an overage amount defined in section 12A 20 below, for such salary cap year that exceeds 6%. So if the overage amount, whatever it is greater than 6% of total salaries and benefits. So the 6% has to be more than total salaries, player salaries and all the benefits that come with it. So that's what needs to be greater than, right? Okay. Then the salary cap, the minimum team salary, the tax level, the apron level, all those things that we were calculating yesterday, all those money amounts will be reduced. So again, if the overage amount is greater than 6%, then the total salaries and benefits, then all the numbers that we calculated yesterday, like how much money a team has for the salary cap, for every team, and how large the tax apron is, and the first apron and second apron, all that stuff is reduced if that number exceeds 6%. This is why I said those numbers are not set in stone, because if something like this happens, as we see an overage amount, then the amount that they have to spend actually decreases. So that's why I said it's complicated, and there are, stipulations to each of these numbers that we even calculated yesterday and that go on every day. Okay, so I hope that made sense so far. So then, to calculate the reduced amount, this is where it gets a little complicated, but again, when we get to the numbers, it makes more sense. I see someone said hi, discussing the CBA. So step 1 is subtract 6% of total salaries and benefits from the overage amount. So I believe I said that yesterday too. So again, I feel like that's self-explanatory. Let me know if you need me to explain that, but I feel like subtracting 6%, that's what we're doing. There's nothing really else to say, right? Okay. So here's where it gets a little, more complicated. If the projected BRI, and if you remember yesterday, BRI is basketball-related income. And if projected BRI for the subsequent salary cap year, which means the next year, does not exceed the BRI for the salary cap year that they're currently in, whatever it is, by more than 8% of BRI for the salary cap year, or this is why it gets a little complicated because there is multiple stipulations, or the overage amount described above exceeds 9% of total salaries and benefits, like I was saying before, then you divide the results from step 1, where we subtracted 6% of total salaries and benefits from the overage amount. Whatever that number is, you divide that by the number of teams in the NBA, which is 30 teams in the NBA. So whatever that number is, if those things happen, if the BRI does not exceed the BRI for the year that is currently happening, the subsequent year, if the BRI for the subsequent year does not exceed the current BRI, then we may have to go to this step 2, where we divide it by the 30 teams, which, as you could probably guess, if you have to do these extra steps, the salary cap and the amount that they could spend is reduced more. So like, before I get a little further, the first step is subtracting the 6%, total salary and benefits from the overage amount, right? Let's just say that was where we stopped or something like that. You can imagine that, and I'm just giving a random example. This is not numbers, this is nothing. But let's just say you did 200 minus 100, right? You have 100 left. That sounds accurate, right? And now let's say you lost $50. So now you actually ended up with $50. So that's not obviously comparable to what I said, like these rules. But what I'm explaining by saying that is like, the more steps we do, like the more things we have to divide and subtract, means that the amount of money that teams can spend keeps getting lower and lower until it reaches a certain point. And then we'll discuss that a little later. At what level does it stop? But the more that, basically the less money the NBA makes means the less money they have to spend. That's really the gist of it. Like, the better the NBA does in terms of income, revenue, the better it does, the more likelihood is that the amount that is reduced by, if it is reduced, is less. The less money that they make, revenue, income, all that kind of stuff, net income, all those things, then it means likely there is more money that is taken away from the salary cap, from the first apron, from the tax levels. Like, I hope that makes sense. So let me know if that makes sense. So that's basically, how they are getting these numbers. So anyway, let's move on. So then it says the results of this calculation that we were just talking about, where you divide it by 30 teams and all that, that is the amount of the reduction in the salary cap, the minimum team salary, tax level, first apron, second apron, and no further steps are required. So, right? So that's like one of the more basic ways. So like, again, I'm saying, if we just had to stop there based on the results of what happened throughout the season, then that would probably be the least amount that is taken away from teams based on, the projected incomes and stuff like that. But this is where we continue. But if projected BRI for the subsequent salary cap year exceeds 108% of BRI for the salary cap year, so if projected BRI for the next year, so 2025, 2026, if it is 108%, exceeds 108% of what it was for 2024, 2025, and the overage amount described above does not exceed 9%. So now we don't want it to exceed 9% in this scenario. Or, I guess whatever we do, we don't. But like in this scenario, they don't. Of total salaries and benefits, then we proceed to step 3. So now we have a scenario where the projected BRI is exceeding 108%, and the overage amount does not exceed 9%. So now we got to do another step. So here we go. So we're going to subtract 108% of BRI for the salary cap year that they're currently in from projected BRI for the subsequent year. So you're taking that 108% and subtracting it from whatever the number is for the current year, and then subtracting that from the next year's projected BRI. So then you multiply whatever your number is by 50%, so you can get like a whatever kind of number they're looking for, because you're dealing with percentages here, so you multiply it so that way it gets out of like the percentage points, if that makes sense. You have to like multiply, when you do like decimals and those kind of things. Anyway, the way I do math in my head is, whatever. Not the point. Okay, so we multiply by 50%, right? Now, whatever our number was after step 3, this multiplying by 50%, we are now going to subtract the results of step 4 from the results of step 1. So remember, step 1 was subtracting 6% from the total salaries and benefits. Well, let me just make sure. Let me just say it properly before subtract 6%, subtract 6% of total salaries and benefits. It's a mouthful, I'm sorry. I'm trying to make sure I say it properly so that way I don't confuse you. Subtract 6% of total salaries and benefits from the overage amount, right? So that number that we got from step 1, now we are taking that number and subtracting it, or we're taking the number we got from step 4 and subtracting it from the number we got from step 1, right? So if the result of this, whatever the numbers are, so let's say step 4, I'm giving you easy numbers to understand. Let's say step 4 leaves us with a 6, right? 6, whatever it is. And step 1 leaves us with 7. So what would that mean? That would mean that it's -1. So you're like, how do you get a -1, right? Well, you can have negative numbers in basketball because it just means you're losing income. That's basically what it means. Negative means you're obviously losing. So if the result of the step is less than 0, so let's say the 6 minus 7 is -1, then no adjustments shall be made to the salary cap, the minimum team salary, tax level for the subsequent year, and no further steps are required. So in this scenario, that's what they want. Well, that's what teams want. Teams don't want to lose any money. So they're probably hoping every time step 4 minus step 1 is less than 0, because that's good for them. Teams, players, all that stuff. That's what they're hoping for. And then we go to step 6. Then we divide the results of step 5 by the number of teams in the NBA again, so that's 30. And talk about expansion teams, but there are no expansion teams right now, so it's not super relevant, that part. And then the result of this calculation, so now we're taking the results of, so step 1, I said we got -1 in my made-up scenario. So the -1 gets divided by 30. Again, the number would not be that simple, so I guess using these fake numbers wouldn't make much sense. I see someone said, but step 3 would be less than 5, right? Step 3 would be less than 5. What do you mean? Step 3 is when you subtract the 108% of BRI for the current salary cap year from projected BRI for subsequent salary cap year. And then you're multiplying that result by 50%. And then you're taking that number. So step 5 is taking that number from step 3. So step 3 and step 5 are the same number, if that makes sense. It's not the same number because you're doing calculations, but it's you're doing steps to get to the same number. I don't know if that made sense. What I'm saying is step 3 and step 5 are they're different numbers because you're making calculations, but they are using the same numbers. I'm saying, it's not like step 1 where we're just subtracting 6% from overage amount, the total salaries and benefits from the overage amount, and this is dealing with projected BRI. Step 3, 4, and 5 are all with the same thing. We're dealing with BRI. So did that make sense? Because I'm not really exactly sure what your question is. So I hope that answered your question, because I'm not 100% sure. So maybe like reword it. Sorry. I see, but the benefits over step 3. I'm not understanding the question. I'm so sorry. Maybe I'm just like, I don't know. I'm not understanding the question. So I'm going to continue on. And if I see your question a little later and I understand it better, I will definitely try to answer it. But I'm a little confused by your question. I'm so sorry. So now we're taking the results of step 5 and dividing it by the number of teams in the NBA during the subsequent salary year. And the result of whatever the number is the amount of reduction that the, team salary, the salary cap, the first apron, second apron, it's always all the same things. The result, whatever the reduction is how much it has to be reduced by. I see the comment again. If you subtract step 2 by 5 twice, you get the benefits of step 4. If you subtract step 2, step 2, let me go back. If you subtract let me find that comment. If you subtract step 2 by 5 twice, you get the benefits of step 4. Hold on, I'm reading here. No, step 2 is not related to step 5, because step 2, if you qualify for step 2, like the qualifications are that the projected BRI for the subsequent salary cap year does not exceed the current salary cap year by 8%, and then also the overage amount is not more than 9%, then no further steps are required. So step 2 is unrelated if the numbers qualify. So like step 2 and step 5 are not necessarily related. It just depends. But like step 2 isn't necessarily related to step 5. So I think that's what you're asking. So my answer would be no, because if the numbers from step 2 don't qualify, then you have to do step 3 and then step 4. So I hope that made sense. Again, not an expert on the cap, so I could be saying something wrong, but I think I understand what you're asking, and I think I answered your question, but if I didn't, I'm so sorry. So we're on step 6 now, and here's where they put the numbers now. So now we can like have it with real number examples, which will make so much more sense. You'll see. So the example is, assume that the 2024-2025 total salaries and benefits is $5.5 billion, right? The 2024-2025 designated share is $5.1 billion, and the resulting overage amount is $400 million. So here's the overage amount that we were talking about. That is, getting 6% subtracted from it from the total salaries and benefits. But they're going to give us the number, so don't worry about it. And the $400 million of the overage amount for this current salary year equals 7.3% of total salaries and benefits. So remember, we have that 9% in mind with the overage amount. Remember, keep that in mind. So projected BRI is $10.5 billion. And projected BRI is $10.5 billion for 25-26 season, so next year. And 2024-2025 BRI is $10 billion. So it's $500 million. They're projecting that next year, the BRI will be $500 million more than this current year, right? Okay. See, I said the numbers just make it make so much more sense. Like already it makes more sense, at least to me. And so the projected BRI, like I said, is increasing by $500 million, which is 5%. So is 5% good or bad? Let me know in the comments down below before I continue. See if you understood the math from earlier. But, lost my spot. Okay, here we go. So now, since the BRI exceeds it by 5%, like I just said, there are 30 teams in the NBA in the 2025-2026 season because they have not expanded yet, not officially. So it's still 30 teams. So the salary cap, minimum team salary, tax level, the first apron level, second apron level, all those things would be reduced by 2,333,333. It's all threes. That's why it's a little confusing. Because the example is that the overage amount of $400 million, right, that we just talked about, that they gave as a number as the example, less $330 million. So what's $330 million, right? That's the 6% of total salaries and benefits. Because remember, you have to calculate that and subtract those two numbers. So that gives you $70 million. That was step one. If you remember, that was step one. And so you divide by 30, and then you get the number that they got. That's how they got that number. But now we're going to do another example where we have BRI be 10.9 billion, the projected, which means it exceeds it by 9%, which is the number that we talked about earlier to get the extra steps, which is why they gave both scenarios. So now we're assuming that the projected BRI is 10.9 billion instead of 10.5, but everything else is the same. So because the projected BRI exceeds by 9% instead of 5, now we have different steps. And what that means is the minimum team salary, tax level, first apron level, second apron level, all those things will be reduced by $666,667, which is obviously better than $2 million. So in the NBA, the teams and all that kind of stuff, and the players and, all that, they want BRI to exceed 9% because it means they have to lose less money when it comes to the salary cap, the tax aprons, all that stuff. Like, they have more leverage, if that makes sense. Like, the amount that is reduced by is less. So the more that BRI exceeds, 9% and above, it ends up being better because the salary cap will be reduced by less, which means it's higher. So they have more money to spend, technically. That makes sense? Okay. And the reason they got this is the difference between 70 million from the prior example and 50 million, because 50% of 100 million of the projected BRI of 10.9 billion minus the 10.8 billion, because 108% of the 2024-2025 season, because the BRI for 2024-2025 is 10 million, and 108% of that makes it the 10.8 billion. So that's where they got that. And then, like I said, you subtract those numbers and then you divide by 30. So that is how they got all those numbers. Now here's the last part. Here's the last part. I hope that this makes sense. I hope you guys understand this. Like I said yesterday, this is like way more complicated than what we were talking about yesterday. So again, not a cap expert, not all this stuff. Like, it's a little complicated for me to understand too, if I'm being honest. So I'm trying my best to explain it properly. So I hope you guys, are enjoying this in any kind of way. And, I just hope this is helpful. Like, I think I'm making sense, but like, there may be some things that I'm not saying 100% properly. But I think I'm making sense. I'm hoping that this, at least gives you guys some insight into how they're getting these numbers every year for the salary cap, for the tax. Like, where are these numbers coming from? How are they calculating this? Like, what are the benefits and negatives and all that stuff? So that is that. So now let me just finish like the last part of this. And then, that was a lot of math. So notwithstanding to any of the contrary in the above. So here's where I said there's a stipulation. In no event shall any of the salary cap, minimum team salary, like all those things that we keep talking about, it can never decrease to an amount that is less than the amount for the immediately preceding salary cap year. So, like I said, there are stipulations. So like it can decrease by $2 million, as they said in the scenario, but it can't decrease by, I'm exaggerating here, but it can't decrease by like $200 million. I mean, maybe it can, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there is a certain level that it can't decrease by. Like, the salary cap can't, well, like it said, can't decrease to an amount that is less than the amount for the immediately preceding salary cap year. Like, there's like a cutoff line, basically. And same with the other way, it can't increase by more than 110% of the immediately preceding salary cap year. And the reason I think they put that in is because if you remember, and I don't know this 100%, but if you remember, in 2016, do you remember the cap spike where like the cap went up way more than 110% from what I remember? It was a huge spike, like the TV deal, like everything kicked in, and the 2016 salary cap went up a ton. That's when all those crazy contracts came into play. Like, that's when, you know, unfortunately some players got labeled as having bad contracts 2 years past that because the teams had so much money to spend. They were giving players these really large contracts because it was like the new numbers. But like they didn't, you know, they couldn't foreshadow what was going to happen 2 years from then. You know what I'm saying? It was just like the new numbers that were going to be part of the NBA. And so, again, this is not 100%. This is me like remembering. But because of that, I think from what I remember, the league didn't want that happening again, where the cap spikes like that, like crazy, and they want it to be more like a steady increase. So I believe they put that rule. I don't know if that rule was in there before, so I can't say for sure, but I believe they put that rule in because of that. So the cap will go up like somewhat steady, not just like a huge spike and then all of a sudden all these teams have a ton of money randomly. You know what I'm saying? So I believe that's where this rule came from. But again, that's not 100%. And that's that. Yeah, we did it. Hooray. That was what I wanted to read to you guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Today was a little more complicated, so I'm sorry if like it was a little confusing, but hopefully I explained it well. And I hope you guys enjoyed. Bye.